Which medical schools are friendly to out-of-state applicants? That's what I want to talk to you guys about in today's video, because when it comes time to apply to medical schools, many medical school applicants are considering whether or not they should apply and study in-state versus out-of-state. I'm going to help you decide if you should study out-of-state, discuss what makes a good out-of-state applicant, and I'll give you a list of all out-of-state friendly medical schools. And finally, I'm going to tell you 21 of the easiest medical schools to get into as an out-of-state applicant. A quick intro from me and then we'll get started. Hi, I'm Nadine Evans with BeMo Academic Consulting. Be sure to subscribe on whatever social media channel you're watching this from now so you don't miss any of our upcoming videos. If you'd like us to help you get into medical school, click on the link either above or below this video to schedule your free initial consultation. So what do I mean when I talk about out-of-state friendly medical schools? So these are medical schools that will accept out-of-state applicants because some medical schools exclude these applicants completely. For the most part, applicants are considered out-of-state if they are a resident of a state outside of a medical school state. There are, however, some exceptions to this rule, as some schools form agreements with nearby states to alter the classification of an in-state versus an out-of-state applicant. For example, the UW School of Medicine in Washington is actually a 5-state school. So 95% of all their available spots go to Washington, Wyoming, Alaska, Montana, and Idaho residents. They consider anyone from these states in region and therefore classify them as residents. When determining if you should study in-state compared with out-of-state, there are some important factors to consider. The first one is the cost. Our students are always wondering if it's more expensive to attend medical school as an out-of-state applicant. Well, the answer to that depends. If you're applying as an out-of-state resident to a public medical school, then yes, it'll be much more expensive. Last year, on average, in-state residents paid roughly $37,000 for 1 year of tuition fees and health insurance compared with the $62,000 that out-of-state applicants paid. If, however, you're applying as an out-of-state resident to a private medical school, we don't see the same discrepancy in cost. In the previous years, in-state residents paid approximately $60,000 for 1 year of tuition, fees, and health insurance. Similarly, out-of-state residents paid on average of $62,000, so we're only talking about a $2,000 difference here. So when determining the expense of attending medical school as an out-of-state applicant, it completely depends on whether or not you're applying to a public or a private school. The next factor to consider is the proximity to your support system. If you apply to an out-of-state medical school, the reality is that your support system, so your family and friends, will be farther away from you, meaning that their support will be less readily available. While it's true that phone calls and video chatting are a good second option, it's hard to beat the in-person connection. If you're out of state in general, you may see your family and friends less, and it might be harder for you to get home for holidays and events, and potentially more expensive. Medical school is very difficult, and some students underestimate the value of having their support system close by. When you move to somewhere that you haven't been before or somewhere where you don't have any connections, it can be difficult and it can feel isolating. But this totally depends on the person and the situation. Some people love new adventures, meeting new people, and they don't mind about being dropped somewhere out of their comfort zone where they don't even know a soul. On the other hand, other people can feel homesick, so it's important to consider what your personality is and how much you rely on or will rely on your support system when considering if you should study out of state compared to in-state. The next consideration is acceptance rate. Is it harder for out-of-state applicants to get into public medical schools? 100%. This is because in-state medical schools are funded by the state, and they usually have a specific number of slots that must be allocated to in-state students. While this number does vary between schools, on average there are less than 10% of all spots available for out-of-state applicants. Private schools are different. Most of them don't have any preference for in-state applicants, so the acceptance rates at these schools don't vary for in-state compared with out-of-state applicants. Finally, you need to consider the school's admission statistics for out-of-state residents to see how your scores compare. While some schools' minimum admission requirements are the same for in-state compared with out-of-state applicants, some schools actually hold out-of-state applicants to higher standards. For example, if an in-state applicant was required to have a minimum GPA of 3.0 to be considered, an out-of-state applicant may be required to hold a 3.2 GPA to be considered, and the same goes for the MCAT. So you need to make sure that you review the school's admission requirements closely to ensure that you meet the minimum requirements and ideally will generally be seen as a competitive applicant. Okay, so if you've considered the factors I mentioned and feel that you want to apply to an out-of-state medical school, the next step is to determine what makes a good, competitive, and successful out-of-state applicant. As I mentioned previously, your scores need to be competitive to start with. That means ideally that you'll have an average to excellent GPA and MCAT score for the schools that you're applying to. The next essential item is your actual primary application. So your AMCAS work and activity section, your personal statement, and secondary essays all need to be fantastic. Remember, if you're applying to a public medical school, they strongly favor in-state applicants. Why? Because they feel that in-state applicants are more likely to serve the local community by practicing medicine in-state once they've graduated. So your application needs to demonstrate your love of the medical school state, your connections to the state, and your motivations for practicing medicine in that particular state. So, for example, there are some students that want to apply out of state because maybe they've spent their summers in a particular state at a family cottage. Having significant ties to a state can certainly put you at an advantage when applying as an out-of-state applicant. Maybe you've worked or studied at a particular state, or you have parents or other family members that live there, so you visit often. If you don't have any ties or connections to a state, don't feel discouraged. Maybe you have an intention of moving, living, or working in a particular state because you're interested in that state's local, rural, underserved community, and you want to use your own personal experiences and skills to make a difference. Make sure you factor in a school's mission statement and values because they often help you determine what kind of applicant they're looking for and where their passions lie. You may find that your own passions and motivations line up well with an out-of-state medical school. Essentially, to be a good candidate, you need to have a real reason for applying out of state, and you need to demonstrate this passion and dedication in your medical school application. In particular, your personal statement really needs to speak to this fact. It won't be enough to simply say that you like a state and you think it's a nice place. Remember, competition is high for out-of-state applicants due to the low number of available spots and the high amount of applications received, so it's essential to make sure that your application stands out. Okay, so I have a long list of out-of-state friendly medical schools that I've created for you. I've included a link in the description of this video so you can easily find it. Simply check by state and you'll see the medical schools that are accepting out-of-state applicants. Plus, I've included the percentage of out-of-state matriculants in the previous year. Okay, so now for the 21 easiest medical schools to get into out-of-state. So these are good schools to consider because they have the highest out-of-state success rates. So at position 21, we have UND North Dakota at 1.9%. At 20, we have Johns Hopkins in Maryland at 1.9%. At 19, we have Texas Tech at 2%, Pennsylvania Perelman in Pennsylvania at 2%. At 17, we have Harvard in Massachusetts at 2.1%. At position 16, there's USF Morsani in Florida at 2.1%. At 15, we have Ponce in Puerto Rico at 2.1%. At 14, we have Jefferson Kimmel in Pennsylvania at 2.2%. Number 13, UV Virginia, 2.2%. Number 12, UT Southwestern in Texas, 2.2%. 11, San Juan Bautista in Puerto Rico at 2.2%. Number 10, St. Louis in Missouri, 2.3%. Number 9, Loma Linda, California, 2.4%. 8, UT San Antonio in Texas, 2.5%. 7, Cincinnati, Ohio, 2.5%. 6, Creighton, Nebraska, 2.5%. 5, Cape Western Reserve, Ohio, 2.6%. 4, Florida Atlantic Schmidt in Florida, 2.7%. 3, Missouri Kansas City, Missouri at 3.9%. 2, TCU UNT HSC, Texas, 4.6%. And finally, the number 1 easiest medical school to get into for out-of-state applicants is the Uniformed Services Herbert in Maryland at 5.5%. Okay, so there you have it. Thanks for watching, and hopefully you enjoyed it, so please subscribe, like, and leave a comment if you have any questions that we can help you with. If you'd like us to help you get into med school, click on the link either above or below this video to schedule your free initial consultation. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.